usage in governance.
We are live.
जिसमें हमने बात किया ना MORTH पासपोर्ट सिस्टम एंड डायरेक्ट बेनिफिट ट्रांसफर आई थिंक ये हो चुका है ना क्यों
Sir, we are live.
ओके Hey, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on which part of the world you are in. Welcome to this 81st episode of ClariTea Chat, which is also the 21st edition of the Ask Me Anything, the AMA as we call it. Tomorrow is the auspicious day of Christmas. Merry Christmas to everyone. Let's remember the message of Jesus: love, forgiveness, and acceptance. Um, So let's have candid conversations today. As the name says, drive clarity on issues and challenges top of your mind, technology, management, or leadership. We do have quite a bit of backlog of questions which we have here, but of course, we'll give preference to the live questions. So some of our backlog questions include, like the challenges for startups. Very interesting question on how can IT support R&D and planning. Uh, uh, the benefits of digital factory in the short and long term. Um, and yeah, and we'll balance these with live questions from your end. So let's cover questions. Anything on your mind relating to IT leadership, any chronic issue that you've been having. Let's discuss challenges around technology being necessary but not sufficient. Um, but let's also, before we begin, I would like to say, tell everyone that, be safe. There are fresh doomsday warnings of COVID-19 outbreaks across the world with esoteric variants like XBB and BF7. Um, uh, there's some panic which is appearing, but of course, there are many people who are like not worried about it. Uh, we are prepared with vaccinations, but if you have not taken a booster dose, please go ahead and take a booster dose. I did it about 2 months back myself, and let's bring back the safety playbook of wearing masks in crowded places, and the protocols that we have lived with for last almost 2.5 years. So what are your safety precautions? Are you really going to party hard in the crowded places, um, or what is your plan for the new year? Send in your comments. As always, you're welcome to come live with me um, with your discussion topic or case study. Send us your comments by private message, and we will. Sorry, my team will send you a private message inviting you. Or you can try something which is send me such a complex question that I'm forced to invite you. So let's begin. And as always, you will get honest answers, case studies, practical approaches, and thought processes. Okay, it's all experiences, no gyan. But before we go ahead, let me request all of you, my audiences, to share your name and where you're joining from in the comment box of LinkedIn or YouTube. I don't yet see anyone who has joined here. I mean, who has sent a comment yet. But yeah, I'm sitting alone in a room, and it will be good to see your comments, uh, to know that I'm not talking to a blank screen. Okay. So, oh, thanks, Sats. I was thinking that, like everyone has gone on holidays. And so I'm like going to talk to the screen alone. And yeah, thanks, Vinay, for letting me know separately that there are at least 18 to 20 people already there. So, guys, yeah, let me know who you are, where you're joining from, and let's begin. Okay. So, the first question is a very interesting one. The question is, how can IT support R&D, planning, delivery efficiency, and innovation? That's a very interesting question. Um, now, if any one of you in your organizations or when you're serving your customers with your customers, if you have any experience how IT has really accelerated the R&D, product planning, etc., send us your comments, send us that experience in your comments. But before that, let me share mine while you write yours. um, so let's first understand that when we talk about R&D and IT helping R&D, let's understand, let's go back to the basics, what I call as first principles. Let's bring in some first principles. So, what is fundamentally changing about products that R&D department of any company does, right? And we are talking of brick and mortar companies here. I think the the product has a lot of digital content in it nowadays, right? And the moment you bring in any kind of, whether it's an IoT, whether it's like a sort of integrating the product with an app, like for example your fan switch can be controlled by an app today. um, so the moment you have software inside your products, the typical traditional product development needs to evolve with the IT methods, integrating the IT methods in them. So uh, while the typical product planning R&D are very good at a large scale development, large teams, um, sitting across multiple locations, working with suppliers, component development and all of that. uh, IT guys do a different set of things. So there are complementary capabilities between R&D and software development, which need to pull in together to make it like a 2 plus 2 equal to 5 or 7 for the organization. So first thing is, we need to mix these teams and create and get into a squad mode, a squad which has got IT folks as well as your R&D folks. Okay, that's where the knowledge transfer happens. Um, and then, bring in the agile practices. Uh, Agile can then become large scale agile. That means agile across multiple different teams. A typical thing with R&D folks. The other thing, when you have the software, like you have different product versions, the software will also evolve. So you can get into DevOps and automated testing, right? That's something else which IT can bring into the R&D teams. And I think one of the biggest ones that we can help the R&D teams with is the connects with our partners. You um, Not just connect with our partners, but also sort of helping them leverage the open source, right? There are many things that IT again does better, in terms of version control, in terms of another big one which we have dealt with for a long time is security, right? Now, as software gets into the products and your products start generating data, the security and privacy of that data becomes another important aspect, which was never really the bother, for the R&D teams. They were more worried about the product security, the physical security part of the product, right? So that's another area of collaboration. Um, so this whole CI/CD as we do in IT, the CI/CD with automated testing and scalable software. Um, I mean, that's another opportunity. I think at a different level, um, IT teams can really contribute in collaboration across a sort of a large set of R&D engineers, suppliers, and all of them. So we have various tools and technologies, which we use. For example, Jira, and somewhere we can sort of discuss with our R&D teams as to what can help them in terms of the tool sets itself, the entire what we have, the software driven software development, a lot of software tools aiding the software development in terms of the speed that we can bring in. I think those are things that probably the R&D teams uh, can be helped with, right? So now, just to summarize this, how can IT accelerate R&D and D and planning teams? Number one, the fundamental difference now is that the products have got a lot of software and digital content in them, and therefore, they require uh, they require the IT inputs as you manage those software in terms of their versions and evolution. So where IT and R&D can come together is um, first bring the teams together in agile squads, um, work together on the architecture, bring in practices like agile, DevOps, CI/CD, um, support the R&D teams with open source, with your partner networks. A lot of them are into innovation as well, and building the collaboration systems or collaboration mechanisms across the entire R&D setup, as well as with your suppliers and partners. So that's where R&D can be supported very, very ably by IT. I hope that helps. If you have more thoughts, please send across. Meanwhile, I have some action happening on the comments section. So we have Vicky Sharma. Okay, yeah, Vicky, you have sent me a message. Let me see. We have uh, TCS had adopted Clayton Chris 3 level of innovation into Tata Nano Car. Into Tata Nano Car configurator was also an innovation that helped plan supply chain. Oh yes, I think Sats, this is you. Definitely, there was quite a bit of breaking new ground that we had tried in Tata Nano. Given the scale that it was supposed to operate in, which of course didn't happen, and the kind of masses that it was supposed to appeal in, the digital natives, etc. We had planned, a social experience, a lot of digital processes in terms of like, online bookings of nanos and all of that. Yeah. So that brings in a completely new dimension, sets that a lot of it has to do with your customer profile, and the customer profile is changing towards the digital natives and the Gen Y and Gen Gs, and therefore, what they would expect from you, the speed they would expect from you, is going to be different from what it traditionally has been. By the way, Sats, if you want to talk about what this Clayton Chris three levels of innovation is, I'm not very much aware of it, and you want to like quickly talk about it for 5 minutes. Let my team know, and they'll send you the StreamYard link. Okay. Okay. So there's another question here, which from Sats. He's asking, how is the role of chief digital officer different from other traditional CXO roles? Hmm. So Sats, I think chief digital officer, typically is okay. Before I pick that up, so he says we were doing online sales before Tesla. Yes, of course. Tata Nano online sales model came before Tesla, but I think the seriousness with which Tesla has gone about it in terms of the user experience, we were probably not there yet, and then we didn't scale it out beyond Nano, right? So let's give it to Tesla for whatever it is worth. So let me pick up your next question, Sets. How's the role of chief digital officer different from other traditional CXO roles? See, the CIO role, uh, I think somewhere there's a rub off of the definition of CIO role here. See, CIO is supposed to look after technologies across the entire gamut of the company. Almost every single department, every single team in the company is a customer of IT department, because IT is enabling the various productivity and automation and workflows and digitization related stuff for them. We tend to sometimes uh, use the same yardstick for the CDO. That means any kind of digitization, any kind of new age digitization opportunity, whether it's IoT, whether it's mobile apps, etc., has to be done by CDO. But I think no, we can't apply the same yardstick here. Uh, so the first thing, in my view, is to define clearly what is the role of chief digital officer, right? So the few that I have met, the definitions have been different. In one of my ClariTea chats, I had a CIO from Europe, and he was very clear that the CDO looks after all the external facing opportunities, all the customer facing, um, market facing opportunities, where your O2C cycles, or the order to cash cycles, or the inquiry to sales cycles can be expedited, digitized, made into self service, configurability, etc. So he was looking at so the CDO in their case was looking at everything which was outside facing, and which was anything that was internal architecture, workflows, all the enterprise processes, was the role of a CIO. There was another one where you know there was another case where the value realization was the mandate of the CDO. So going into the business with very clear focus on driving outcomes, monetizing the systems that have been put in place, as well as looking at different opportunities. Now, this was a manufacturing company, so there was a lot of value in shaving your cost. Let's say reducing your inventories, in terms of your equipment uptimes, in terms of your reduction in failures, etc., etc. So IoT played a big role, um, as well as since this was manufactured equipment. The other area was, of course, the equipment health, AMCs, services, and all of that, and how to reduce your cost there, and how to increase your value-added content into those services, right? So there are different cuts. The most important thing, sets, is to make sure that we have very clear-cut definition of what is, a clear-cut role description of what is expected from a CDO, and very importantly, also what is the RACI between a CDO and a CIO organization if they're not the same. I'm increasingly seeing that the CIO is expected to play both roles, and sometimes you bring in a CDO to play both roles or sit on top of CIO. But of course, if IT has to drive direct value uh, for customers and for the organization, then yeah, CDO is the role for you. Um, okay, uh, there are no more audience questions. So guys, please continue asking before you start partying later today. Then let me pick up some old questions from the audience. So there was a question from Vipesh, which is about how does digital factory make sense to the business in the short term as well as the long term. Again, let me request my audience, if you have any experiences where um, you have seen factories being transformed with the um, with the induction of digital, I would say, tools like MES or IoT. Please share your experiences with us. But let me talk to you with my experiences. When we said short term and long term. So I went to one of the plants of a German company, um, and that was more for, like, how does IoT get used, and it was and what I experienced was phenomenal because uh, what they had done was to involve every shop floor worker, manager, supervisor into the IoT innovation way of thinking. So these plant floor self self SDGs or self-driven groups. You have multiple, like, productivity councils, and so there's a lot of teamwork which is going on around in the factory. And what they had done was, like, got them made them aware um, of IoT as a means of, like, doing statistical process control, and then sort of start that is and they started generating a lot of ideas on solving quality issues, solving feedback issues, solving feed forward issues, um, with IoT, and it became a grounds of movement. So the only thing which they probably lagged was that these were all, like, individual innovations happening. Each one of them was highly outcome oriented. Either you were tracking quality, that I've taken my quality from here to here, or I've taken my rejection rate down, etc., etc. So this is, like, you can say, a short term or a grounds up approach to transforming digitally your factory, where it is very participative. Um, it's driven right at the worker and supervisor level, and you use the existing mechanisms at the factory floor. These could be suggestion schemes, these could be self-driven teams, STTs, self-driven teams, or these could be like your small councils that you have at all the factory floor levels. A factory floor is highly data-driven, and therefore it's easy to sort of uh, as long as the people are aware and they are bought into this framework, they themselves will drive it. But that was a great example of a very, very participative model of digitizing your factory floor. I think on the other hand, when you look at from the long term point of view, or from the long term, or for a top down point of view, that was our own car plant in Tata Motors, where we had an MES running, and there's this MES we replaced this MES during my time, and built a lot of stuff on top of it. So the approach was that you first put the basic plumbing in place. That means your entire plant is networked. You have an endpoint at every workstation, an MES point, or a PC at every station, and you have these like live and on boards which are being fed, and you have a lot of communication going between different factories, right? So when you create a production plan, it's like circulated to different factories, whether it's your paint shop, whether it's your you know body shop, engine shop, transmission shop, etc. And they all basically, the algorithms basically decide that, okay, what should be my production sequence, and therefore, like what kind of inventories I need to pull, and that would then generate the orders on suppliers. So it was very, very well orchestrated, and that orchestration cannot happen unless you have everyone connected on one single system, and that system basically integrated with your SAP. Okay. Now, once you have that going, and then you marry it with this, what I told you about the grounds up, approach. I think you have a killer recipe. You have a killer recipe. So you have all these ideas, which are coming from the shop floor level, at a self-directed teams level, at an individual shop level, and then you already have a sort of a well-architected system in place, and all you need to do is to just get the right what do you call equipment, connected and programmed, and then drive value out of it. So just to summarize on this point, uh, we have to look at it. We have to look at digital factory not only from the short term and long term point of view, but also from a bottoms up and top down point of view. From a top down point of view, we should be creating the right architecture, connecting the various factories, connecting our suppliers, connecting the manufacturing systems to your ERP and supplier systems, and make sure that you have this entire plumbing ready. Then comes grounds up, where we need to educate our plant floor teams, right from your workers, supervisors, managers, to the possibilities of digital interventions being able to improve what we called as SQDCM, delivery quality. Uh, I forget it, uh, but everything right from your productivity, your quality, your machine health, your what do you call people. So grounds up, um, the factory floor is very, very data driven, uh, very collaborative. There are teams and factory level productivity councils and everyone who are continuously looking at various data points across the SQDCM. And when you connect these through and when you are driving improvements grounds up on these through digital interventions, and then you are connecting it to the bigger architecture, I think that's where your killer proposition is to improve your operations health. Um, okay, so let me see if there's any other question. Um, but while I was searching for questions, I found this comment from Rakesh. Hi, Rakesh. Rakesh, just wait there. I've got a question for you guys on startups. Okay, so I don't have any more audience questions. Looks like everyone is in a holiday mode. So let me pick up another question, which is from Rishikesh Bhingardive, and he's the founder and director at AceCom Services. And his question was, which we didn't pick up, was why is it challenging for startups to get business? But before I answer that question, to Rakesh and to other guys out there, uh, why don't you share your perspective on startup challenges? So if you're on a customer side, why don't you give business to startups? What is it that you feel that the startups are not sufficiently equipped in terms of handling your requirements? Or if you're a startup, then what are the challenges you face in getting business? So I think by the again going back to the first principles, by the very definition, the startups are very focused on solving a given challenge. They pick up a problem, they go deep down into it, they understand the customer pain points, they understand, they look at different personas, they use various methods uh, to go deeper into the problem and then solve it in a very agile and iterative way. I can tell you how passionately my team is working on Block and Go and trying to gather more and more insights and really believing in that concept. But then what happens is that when you're so focused and so deep down into one particular problem, I think sometimes you can miss the bigger picture, right? Which is how does, like, for a simple thing, like for example, how does your product or service integrate with the rest of the architecture? Like, is it secure enough or not? um, when somebody needs to when somebody incorporates it into their organization, are they will they be I mean, how will you run a project with them, right? So um, so the typical problems in creating a product, but how does it like integrate, how does it operate, how does it assimilate with the rest of the architecture that your customers are going to have? I think we sometimes miss that picture, and sometimes as a startup, we may not have the necessary wherewithal to go deep into like, hey, how will my product integrate with your SAP, right? But apart from that, I think there are challenges on both sides. When I was looking at engaging more and more with the startups, the typical challenge that uh, comes in is a typical buying cycle with a traditional IT company. It's like you buy on the quarter end, you buy on the year end, and then it's a long engagement cycle. It's like sort of dating where you're going to get married after a year. The sales cycles are typically long. But then everyone is used to it, and then in between you will have the partner basically conducting knowledge sessions for you, and engagement in various different senses. And I don't think as a startups they have either the money or the patience or uh, the sophistication to engage at different levels and for that longer time, right? That's where the frustration builds in. So this is something I think that needs more fixing on the enterprise side, in my view. That you need to have two tracks. There's a traditional what we call as a bimodal IT, in which there's one mode in which things move slowly, and there's another mode where things have to move really fast. that bimodal IT also needs to translate into your procurement practices and processes. So you may have a different process for a different slow quarter ending kind of process for the big ones of IT. But then when you're looking at startups, I think you need to have a much faster process. Um, going being more iterative, like for example, getting fast to a pilot and establishing success, and then maybe like scaling it up and then scaling it up, and in the process and somewhere in between, when you are like serious about inducting the technology in a big way, that is the point when you really need to bring in a more rigorous procurement process rather than right at the beginning. So you need to write down a different process for your startup engagements as an enterprise. And as far as startups are concerned, I think uh, they need to understand the whole buying process. They need to also be more clear about qualifying their customers. There are customers out there who are keen to engage with the startups, who know that startups can change their trajectory, and there are those who are not, but they are big names. Okay, so um, it's not only that customers choose their suppliers, but it is that even suppliers can choose your customers, especially when you have resource crunch, and when you have like you can't handle going out there and sell to everyone. So you got to prioritize on who are the customers you go after. So my suggestion would be that for startups to also, when you are doing your shortlisting, have clear cut criteria that what are the enterprise enablers you are looking for in an organization, which will make your engagement speedy, even if it comes to a no, but if it happens with some amount of speed, you don't really mind it. So I suggest to my mentees that uh, be choosy about the customers you work with. The customers who can waste a lot of your time. Okay, uh, but there are customers out there who really want to get ahead of the competition, who really want to become the industry benchmarks. They will be tough to get because everyone is after them. But probably those are the ones you should be going after, right? So now, just to summarize the point, um, why is it challenging for startups to get business? Number one is the traditional software buying cycles of enterprises. They are very slow. They are tuned to the large vendors, and therefore the process can be very frustrating for startups. So, both as an enterprise, if you want to get ahead on innovation, get ahead of your industry, you need startups, and therefore you need to have a separate set of agile processes for engaging with the startups and creating early successes before you undertake long negotiations. On the startup side, you need to be more choosy about your customers. Again, find out who are the people who are really passionate about innovation, about getting ahead in the industry, um, who have the funding, the processes to engage with the startups, who have got the startup cohorts to help them, and go after those kind of companies where there are enterprise level enablers which will help you. Um, but startups is something which can really take innovation fast forward in enterprises, and but both need to take a step in that direction. I hope that helps, but let me see if there are any comments here. Okay, I can see a lot of comments here for this one. Okay, so we have sets mentioning as customer fear is one LTS support model may not exist. Assumption that a startup wants to be bought over and leading to point one. Marquee customers needed to show relevancy. Yes, sets you are bang on. the long-term support model may not exist. That's, I think, one of the big fears. So one of the big fears around engaging with the startups is, how about longevity. How long is the startup going to last? That's a question that needs to be answered. So some startups use a model of what is it called? Sets, if you remind me. Where you it's called an escrow. So you keep your code in somewhere in the escrow, and if you go under, if you get bought over, there's an escrow clause in your contract where you get access to the code, so you're not left hanging, right? The second one is yeah, there's a assumption that the startup wants to be bought over. All startups need to have some or the other exit strategy. But sets on this, if a startup is bought over by by a larger player, um, sometimes it may be more sustainable because now this product is in safe hands, with, let's say, a cash rich company who will support this product. But yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. Maybe there may be a fear that they would want to extinguish that product and move these people onto something more expensive. Very, very real risk. I think escrow should help there as well. And third is marquee customers needed to show relevancy. This is this is a chicken and egg question. Sets. If everyone is looking for you to, like, to have a marquee customer in your fold, uh, then, like, how will you ever sell? It's like, that everyone wants people with experience, but if everyone wants people with experience, then who will have freshers? So uh, yeah, some of these are tricky questions. But of course, there is no risk, no reward. So if an enterprise, uh, one of the big differences in mindsets between a CIO and CDO is risk taking. Um, if you are willing to take bets or willing to take risks with certain startups who are promising, who can push you ahead of the competition, then that reward will definitely come with the risk of longevity and being bought over and all of that. So you have to look at your own appetite of risk. So yeah, one last point about the startups is to have a risk management framework for your startups, and apply that and see whether which startup makes a cut. Okay, there's another one from Sats. He says, as a startup, one prime vendor can sometimes be cumbersome. SOW and invoice payout can be long. Customer evangelist has moved on to another role and company. Oh yes, yes. Sets again all the real risks. Most large companies have got a prime vendor, and which can act like as a as a banyan tree for the startup. It has happened. It happened with us. Um, so we had like two large vendors, who were looking after most of our IT, and then we had real trouble getting in startups, because these startups are, again it's the same question that your traditional vendors, your current outsourcers are in the A mode, which is like, slow and steady, keep the lights on, don't take any risks and all that. And then you want to bring in innovation builders around them as startups and somebody who can move fast. They are going to get throttled by these guys. So what we actually did was to keep the digital innovation part outside of the umbrella uh, of our what do you call traditional partners, and these are things that our team drove personally. So we actually built a team for digital innovation, uh, which was doing things ourselves. We were working directly with the startups. Uh, but of course, like, then comes your integration points and the same problems start again. But of course, I think eventually your willpower also matters as a CIO or CDO. That you got to make it work, and you got to put a gun on your supplier side. That guys, I mean, there's no way I want to hear a complaint about this startup, facing challenges from your side, right? Okay. Um, Sats, your question is: can you elaborate on the list of enablers you look for in an enterprise to help startups discern customer selection, offline or as a post? Maybe like let's have this discussion and we'll convert that into a post. Um, so, what are the enablers I look for in an enterprise to help startups to discern selection? The first one, of course, is um, the outlook of the company itself. How much of a bet they are going to put on digital, right? So, is there top management in business talking about digital? Do they have um, what are their external postures around that? That's one. So just read their annual report, and you will know, like, is there digital significantly in that annual report or not, and then you will know, like, what are that is it really driven by IT or by business. The second thing I look for is, like, the people. So the people you're meeting there, the CIO, CDO, maybe the business heads. I mean, how aligned they are, and how passionate they are uh, about transformation and about digital innovations. And this is again something which is like a gut feel. You will know it when you see that passion. Okay. Um, the the third thing is, I would like to, if I'm a startup, I would like to call my bets. Maybe, let's say, in an engagement time of 1 or 2 months. Um, Whether, like, I'm being walled, stonewalled by bureaucracy at every step, or, like, I'm being supported as a startup. Because the the enterprises that are going to benefit from startups are the ones who are going to nurture the startups, rather than look at the startups as vendors, and then and then throttle them at every stage, right? So those are the 3 4 criteria that I would have. And I think maybe the last one would be, a mentoring attitude. Do I get hassled by the team that I don't have this, I don't have this, or is there a mentoring attitude where they say that, hey, you know what, you need to build this, or you need to augment this here, or you need to find a better way to integrate with my SAP and stuff like that, right? So those are the things I would look for. Uh, Sets. Maybe note to my team. Time to think of a post on this one, which can include this one, but this discussion, but also maybe some more thoughts afterwards. I'll think about it definitely, Sets. But good idea. Okay, so we have some international affairs coming in. Karthik is back. Karthik calling Karthik. So Karthik says, hi Jagdish sir, with mainly Russia and now Sri Lanka conducting international trade settlements in Indian rupees, it would also reduce currency fluctuation risks for Indian importers and exporters, as India would have a net positive balance of payments in current account of exports to foreign countries as opposed to imports from them. The RBI should facilitate the use of Indian rupees for this purpose by more nations. What's your opinion about this? Oh, you're asking you're asking the right guy the wrong question. So, Karthik, I'm not an authority on this one, on international currency balance of payments and all of that. But I can give you some of my views, since I read a lot. If I'm not doing anything, you'll find me reading. Uh, See, trade in Indian rupees is a great, I would say, measure. But let's understand that it's not about India doing trade in Indian rupees. It is about the countries that we are trading with, how much trust and confidence they have in Indian rupees, right? Now, I think in the last decade or so, with political stability, which is like, the government having a clear mandate, no coalition pressures, it has led to some very, very clear cut and strategic policy making and, and global relationships for India. So I haven't seen so short and clear cut leadership in the past. I think it used to be there during Indira Gandhi's time, but after that, we have been laden with like the coalition pressure. So people are more managing inside than they are managing outside. So as of today, there are countries, countries trust India much more. They find that we are a reliable, independent, no nonsense partner, and therefore they can trust Indian rupees for their trade, right? And that's what is leading to they accepting INR as a mode of payment. But of course, this has to continue. Um, the second thing is okay. Now whether you import in dollars or whether you import in Indian rupees, import is import, right? So um, my economics professor used to teach an equation which is that your GDP is I think some three times the investment. That investment has a ripple effect on your economy. Uh, it like it has it positively impacts multiple areas. Job creation, commodities, other industries, etc., etc. And then in that equation there was a plus E and minus I. So whether it's Indian rupees or USD, and I is an I. Import is import, and the emphasis, and it has to be counterbalanced by exports. So the entire strategy that you have of Make in India is primarily to reduce the import dependence and to increase exports, and that is a more sustainable uh, path where the whole pressure of what is my balance of payment situation? Do I have money to pay the bills or not? The foreign bills or not? Kind of gets reduced. There's another thing where I see a lot of debate. Uh, which again linked to this, buying of oil and all that. See, and this is about. Let us discuss a little bit about the green energy and the electric vehicle push that the government is making. And India is accelerating on electric vehicles like nobody else, with all the incentives and infrastructure coming in, at a breakneck speed. So let's understand the strategic dimension of electric vehicles. See, India, 70% of India's imports is oil. Okay. Now, the question is that as technology improves, does it really need to be? And I think the whole push on EVs is to reduce India's dependence on oil and to conserve our forex. At the same time, leveraging something where India is already surplus, which is power generation. So I was surprised to see this news some time back that India in power generation has become a surplus country and we actually export power. Now, on one hand, we have done well both in terms of renewable energy, in terms of building power plants and all, and we have an energy surplus, electricity surplus, and on the other hand, we have a 70% dependence on oil imports. What's a logical thing to do? To see if this import can be replaced by something that we are exporting and get that balance in place. That's where the answer is about EVs. There is a there are questions around the environment impact of EVs, but IC engines environment impact is no lesser. So things apart, we have to be very clear. what are we looking for as a country? What are our priorities? And if our priority is to conserve forex by reducing our dependence on oil uh, and go for EVs, that's what we got to do. So I hope, Karthik, that long answer makes sense in a little bit more wider framework for you as to it's not only about Indian rupees, it's about the overall economy and creating it and putting it on a more sustainable path along with the other policies, like, for example, EVs and all, right? So, so just to summarize this one, the government push uh, for INR payments and EVs can be looked at in a more strategic perspective, which is create a more sustainable economy, reduce dependence on imports, create options, around dollars because dollar has gone up in value in recent past, and that really hurts your imports and your inflation. But then, you also look at the other things that the government is doing in terms of reducing the dependence on oil by pushing more for electric vehicles. I think we are on the right track. Okay, so let's stop now. We are at 5:54 India time, and we have no more questions. But we do have someone showing a hands up a little late in the day, Ravikant. Hey, hi Ravikant. I never fail to mention your name because there's another Ravikant who's my mentor. He retired as the vice chairman of Tata Motors, Mr. Ravikant. So, okay, now let's wrap up the session. So we first took up a question on how can IT support R&D, planning, delivery, efficiency, and innovation. Um, Things that IT does, which can be incorporated into the R&D as products have more and more of digital content, is bringing in agile processes, DevOps, um, automated testing, etc., into your R&D process. Connecting with partners, the ecosystem, the the open source ecosystem, and and working together with R&D to leverage these. Another big area is the security and privacy in your product, not only in your products but also in your data and the way that data gets comes into your systems from your products out there. And the other big thing is improving the collaboration with the various software tools that IT already uses for doing speedy software development. Right. The second question was on how's the role of chief digital officer different from traditional CXO roles. Um, See, each of the CXO roles is very well defined. CFO looks after finance, CHRO looks after HR, CMO looks after marketing, operations, and so on. In case of CIO, the role is also very well defined, that looks after the entire IT, and everyone is a customer. In case of CDO, we have to be very careful in defining the role very clearly in terms of what the deliverables and what the mandate is. It can either be all customer facing digital initiatives, or in a different scenario, it can be about all value realization initiatives, whether it's IoT, whether it's mobile apps, or whatever. So, CDO role requires much more crisper definition, and very importantly, a clear cut RACI with your IT function. The next question: how does digital factory make sense in the short term and long term? We can enrich the question by saying, how does the digital factory make sense to the business in short term and long term, and how does it need to be planned and executed top down and bottoms up? So we took two examples. Um, Now we need to architect and execute the complete automation, which is connecting all the factories, connecting the suppliers, connecting your operation control systems with your SAP, and that builds the foundation on top of which you can build your various layers of your digital factory. Now, this is like setting the house, but to occupy the house, you need grounds up innovation, which is involving your factory floor workers, the various self-directed teams, supervisors, managers, leveraging all the existing mechanisms on the shop floor, which is the daily standing meeting on the floor, the quality councils, the productivity trackers, etc., etc., and educate them, involve them, uh, and make them think about where can a digital intervention help them improve the quality or improve the productivity or reduce the failures or improve the machine availability. So make it participative, architected top down, executed bottoms up, and you will have digital factory success in short term and long term. Next question was about why is it challenging for startups to get business? Um, Great discussion uh, with, with good inputs from the audience, especially sets. So, why is it challenging for the startups to get business? You know, the startups are focused on specific problems, and they are deep diving so much that they may sort of lose out a little bit on the overall, I would say, integration into the larger problem. There are real challenges in the procurement processes. There are real challenges in uh, the enterprises getting the confidence that the startups are going to last long and therefore the software is going to be supported for long. It can be mitigated by escrow accounts, where the software code can be kept. Uh, uh, but the underlying theme that also came out is that there are real challenges in working with the startups, as well as for the startups to work with enterprises to sell to enterprises. So for the enterprises, they need to have a risk management framework to assess which startups they should be working with. But for the startups also, they need to have a clear process of which enterprises I should be engaging with in order to optimize my efforts, costs, and in order to get better results. Uh, the last one was more of a global question around. So the question was, trading in Indian rupee. How does it help our balance of payments, exports, imports, etc. I think the larger picture that we need to look at is what is the direction and what is the strategic thinking behind all these initiatives. So there's Make in India, which is trying to bridge the gap between exports and imports and bring in a better balance between them, which is good for the economy, which is good for the currency. The value of dollar has been going up. Dollar has appreciated significantly, which puts pressure on your balance of payments and therefore a strategic move in terms of trading with countries that trust India and Indian currency in Indian rupees, and that reduces your pressure on balance of payments. And the third important one, which in terms of technology and my passion, which is automobiles, we discussed was about the move towards EV. So India is a electricity surplus country, and we spend 70% of our dollars on imports, and therefore, a push for EVs can make sure that we reduce the gap and we kind of balance the electricity supply with reducing our dependence on oil. So that was today's Clarity Chat. Uh, thank you guys for attending, engaging, asking questions. I do see some more comments. We'll probably park them for another later AMA session. So thank you all. Have a great Christmas and have a great holiday season. We'll again meet at the end of the year. Next week, I'm going to make some announcements about our ClariTea Chat 2.0 and what all changes we will be making with respect to factoring in your feedback, various focus groups, surveys, what you like, what you don't like. Some of the changes you would have already seen happening, like finishing on time, like summarizing the answers, doing an end of the chat summary. Those are all coming from your feedback, and we don't want that to wait till Clarity Chat 2.0. So, thank you everyone for attending, engaging. Have a great family time over the next few days as the year ends. Merry Christmas to all of you, and all of you who are watching the recorded version. Uh, Thank you as well. Everyone, have a great family time. See you. Bye bye.